I put my pizza on that table.
Okay.
Bless you, Betty. This side, you know, where I'm talking about, all the way to
Yeah.
on that table, that's where I am going in.
Okay.
There's 4 or 5 people. I don't know where it's more because that's where it is. And I'm not sure it's here this time.
Well, try it out. Maybe just me and Kenton.
Hey, did you have a name? Hey, did you have a name?
Well, very small.
Oh, it should have been large.
Oh, yeah, nobody could see it.
Good morning. Good to see everybody out this morning. Little light, it looks like. A lot of brown back there. I'm not crazy about the brown, like Adam always says. I like to see some color. So, but that's okay. God will bless you, the ones that could make it this morning. Just a good day to be in the house of the Lord. Let's get started this morning. Just remember all the needs that we have today. Let's, a lot of people, you know, sickness and shut-ins and wars and rumors of wars and just all kinds of things going on. But that's okay. We know who's in control. Amen. God's in control. So let's pray about the day. Let's give us a good worship and, you know, shut the outside world out for a little bit and just give him praise and glory. So we'll get started. Brother Bob, do you care to lead us in prayer this morning?
Dear Lord, our Heavenly Father, we thank you, oh God, for another day. We thank you for life and health and all the blessings, God, that you bestowed upon us. Lord, we pray for all the people out here about Pisgah and everywhere, oh God. There's so many sick and so many hurting, dear God. Lord, just be with the shut-ins today, Lord, and be with the little kids, dear Heavenly Father. There's so many of those that maybe don't have a father or a mother, dear Heavenly Father. God, look over and we pray, God. Lord, just be with the pastor today as he brings his message, and be with all the Sunday school teachers, be with Larry. Oh God, we love you and appreciate you so much for all the blessings that you store upon us, dear God. We just ask it all in the precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. You all right, Brother Larry? I think I'm ready to go there. Oh, man. You got 4 bars. You can turn it on. He said he would.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, this morning's lesson, we're actually, well, we're still in the Old Testament, beginning Genesis this time. And the lesson title is God Warns Pharaoh Through Dreams. And wasn't quite sure how to approach this. Introduction, I'm not sure if you have the same introduction as I do or not. But it says, as soon as Adam and Eve sinned in the Garden of Eden, God set his redemptive plan into motion. First, he promised that one of Eve's descendants would crush the head of the deceiving serpent. Then he narrowed the focus of that plan to one family. the restoration of God's blessing to humanity would come through Abraham and Sarah. By the time of Genesis 41, where the lesson comes from, God's chosen family consisted of Abraham's grandson Jacob, Israel, and his children. Jacob's favorite son Joseph had provoked his 11 brothers to jealousy by recounting 2 dreams that prophesied that he would rule over them, and they had responded by selling him into slavery. As Joseph would later explain, God intended from the start to bring him to Egypt through his brother's wicked plot. The reason for that becomes evident in chapter 41, which recounts a famine that endangered not only Egypt, but also the entire Mesopotamian world, including Jacob and his family. And I got, going back and getting the background on this, more or less I was doing a genealogical survey all the way back from where it begins here, and it says God narrowed it down to one family, and that would be Abraham or Abram and his downline. And instead of going all the way back to Adam and Eve, brought it on up to Noah, because God destroyed the earth. Everything got so evil that God wanted to just more or less wipe the slate clean and start all over. Therefore, the flood. And the ones that survived the flood was Noah and Noah and his wife and their 3 sons and their daughters, or wives. And the 3 sons was Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Most of us are probably descendants of Japheth, but the downline into Abraham's family would have been through Shem. And coming down to Abraham, where God made the covenant with Abraham, that he would take his people would be God's people if they worshiped him and stayed with him, and he would take care of them. So from Abraham's wife was Sarah, and I'm pretty sure she was from the same group that Abraham's people were from too. But it doesn't say that. I couldn't find it in the scripture. But it wasn't uncommon at that time. So Abraham and Sarah. Sarah was barren for a long time. God blessed them, and they had a son, Isaac. Isaac then, Abraham did not want Isaac to marry anyone in Canaan. So he sent Abraham sent his servant back to the country that he was from to get a wife for his son Isaac. And her name would have been Rebekah. Now Rebekah had a brother named Laban, which will come into the story a little bit later. But when they bring Rebekah back and Isaac takes her as his wife, they have 2 sons. And that would have been Jacob and Esau, twins. The mother, Rebekah, favored Jacob. Isaac, the father, favored Esau. Esau was a man of outdoors, rough type person, liked to hunt. And his father liked the venison stew that Esau would make. But one day it says that Esau had been hunting, come back in, and his brother Jacob had evidently been fixing food. And Esau said that he was just starving, he had to have something to eat. And Jacob said, well, give me your birthright and you can have this food, which was kind of foolish on both their parts. But he did, he agreed to it. So Esau, being the oldest son, was the firstborn, lost his birthright, he gave it up. Later on now, Rebekah heard Isaac, as he was getting older, that he was going to give his blessing to Esau. She, favoring Jacob, told Jacob, conspired with Jacob for a plan to deceive Isaac and to get Jacob to replace Esau when he received the blessing. So they did. Isaac gave Jacob the blessing, not knowingly, because he couldn't really see very well at all. And Esau was a rough person, had a lot of rough skin, hairy skin, and they placed a sheep's wool upon Jacob's arm, Jacob's arm, to try and fool their father. Well, he did receive the blessing, and when Esau found out that he had not only given up his birthright, but he lost the father's blessing also, he plotted to kill Jacob. Rebekah, knowing that, tells Jacob to go back to her country and stay with her brother Laban until Esau gets over his madness and wanting to destroy him. So he does. So Jacob goes back, stays with Laban. Laban had 2 daughters, Leah, the oldest, and Rachel, the younger one. So Jacob really fell in love with Rachel, the younger one. And he tells Laban, what can I do in order to get her for my wife? And they agreed that he would work 7 years for her. And they agreed on that. So when the 7 years period of time was up, Jacob said, give me my wife. And Laban, as part of it, had a feast, a party. And I don't know if Jacob was drunk or what. But anyway, when it come time for the bride to be given, he gave, instead of Rachel, he gave the oldest daughter, Leah, to him. I don't know how he fooled him, but evidently it says she covered herself with a veil. But anyway, he ended up consummating the marriage with Leah. And then when he found out about it, he goes and confronts Laban about what you've done to me. And he says, well, it was not common in our country for the younger daughter to be married first. The older one had to be married first. So Jacob agrees to work 7 more years for Rachel. And he does. And then he takes Rachel as his wife. When in the meantime, Leah had had several sons. And also he had had sons, Jacob had had sons by Leah's handmaiden and also by Rachel's handmaiden. But Rachel was barren. And she confronted Jacob, and he prayed and asked God to give him a son by Rachel, which he did. That particular son's name was Joseph, where the lesson starts today. And Joseph was looked upon by Jacob as his favorite, because they call him the son of his old age, because he was well in years, and he watched over him, favored him, and even made him the coat. If you remember the story, the coat of many colors. And the other sons became very jealous of him. And especially after Joseph would have dreams, and he would relate those dreams to his brothers. And the dreams were always such that Joseph was going to be ruler over his brothers. And one dream in particular even showed that it said the sun, the moon, the the sun and the moon would bow down to worship him too, meaning his father and mother. And when the sons go back and tell Jacob this, then Jacob confronts Joseph and said, you mean you think even your mother and myself are going to bow down and worship you? He said, that's the dream. So that's what it was. But they got so jealous of him, they plotted to get rid of Joseph. And they did. They didn't kill him, but sold him in as a slave to some traveling merchants that took him into Egypt and sold him there. Joseph ended up in the house of a man by the name of Potiphar, who was captain of the king's guard. And everything that Joseph did, God seemed to bless and watched over him, because he was the damn line that God had picked. But so in Potiphar's house, Joseph rose up in authority, and Potiphar made him the chief servant of all the other servants. Well, Potiphar's wife took a liking to Joseph and tried to entice Joseph to have relations with her. And he kept resisting her, resisting, and finally one day when there was no one else in the house except Joseph and Potiphar's wife, then she made the plan. She offered herself to Joseph, and he says no. And she comes on to Joseph. Joseph tries to get away. She keeps Joseph his coat. And then she brings charges against Joseph, tells her husband that Joseph had tried to force himself upon her, which was a lie. But Potiphar has him thrown in jail. And that's getting close to where the lesson is today. While Joseph is in jail, there's two other prisoners there that had been placed there by the Pharaoh. One was referred to as Pharaoh's butler, and the other was Pharaoh's cook or chef. Doesn't say why they were there, but anyway, they were in disfavor and ended up in jail. They had a dream. Each of them had dreams, very similar dreams. And they were wondering about it, and they happened to tell Joseph about it, and Joseph interpreted the dreams for them. And one of the dreams was the butler dream, and Joseph interpreted that he would be freed and taken back and placed back in his old job. And the cook, his dream was interpreted was, you're going to be hanged. And sure enough, within 2 or 3 days, both of the dreams matured just like Joseph had said they would. Well then, when the butler was placed back in Pharaoh's service again, a couple years had transpired, and Joseph again, under the favor of God, had risen up and become more or less second in command of all the other prisoners in the prison there. So a couple years goes by, and Pharaoh is where the lesson starts today. Okay, and I'm going to do some reading here from chapter 41, but I'll start with verse 8. The lesson doesn't start till verse 25. And this is after Pharaoh has had his dream. And it says, and it came to pass in the morning that his spirit was troubled. Pharaoh's spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for all his magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream. But there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh. Remember the guy that was in prison with Joseph, the butler. Then spake the chief butler unto Pharaoh, saying, I do remember my faults this day. Pharaoh was wroth with his servants, and put me inward in the captain of the guard's house, both me and the chief baker. And we dreamed a dream one night, and I and he, the baker, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream. And there was there with us a young man, a Hebrew, servant to the guard of the captain of the guard, and we told him, and he interpreted to us our dreams. To each man according to his dream he did interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so it was. Me he restored unto mine office, and him he hanged. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. He's in jail, still in jail. And he shaved himself and changed his raiment and came into Pharaoh. So he cleaned up before he went to see Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there is none that can interpret it. And I have heard say of thee that thou canst understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. So now Joseph is not taking credit for it. Joseph knows where his special talents are coming from. And he's realized everything that's happened to him in the past, that God has seemed to take it, what seemed to be bad, and made it come out prosperous for Joseph. So now here is Joseph, and he's saying it's not going to be me that's going to interpret this, but God. Now Pharaoh worshiped completely different gods than Joseph did. But Joseph made the point of saying, it's not me, but it is God, meaning Joseph's God, not Pharaoh's God. And he says, it is not me, God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river. The river, most of the time when it says river in the book, in the Bible, it's referring to the Nile River. Most of the time when there was famines in that area, Egypt still prospered pretty well, simply because of the Nile River. And it is a long, long river running through Egypt. And that whole valley would still have water and would not be so bad like the other countries around it. And it said, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, in my dream, behold, I stood upon the bank of the river, upon the bank of the Nile. And behold, there came out of the river 7 kine, or 7 cows, cattle, fat-fleshed and well-favored, and they fed in a meadow. So the cattle that come up, good-looking cattle. Verse 19, it says, and behold, 7 other kine came up after them, poor and very ill-favored and lean-fleshed, such as I never saw in all the land of Egypt for badness. 7 other cattle came up that looked really, really bad. He said, never even seen anything like that in Egypt, but it was bad. The ones in his dream were really bad. Verse 20, and the lean and the ill-favored kind did eat up the first 7 kine. So the bad-looking cattle actually ate the fat-looking cattle. 21, and when they had eaten it up, it could not be known that they had eaten them, but they were still ill-favored as at the beginning. So I awoke. So even after they had eaten up the 7 fat cattle, they still looked poorly, even though they had had food. Verse 22, and I saw in my dream, and behold, 7 ears came up in one stalk, full of good, probably corn. And behold, verse 23, and behold, 7 ears withered, thin, and blasted with the east wind, sprung up after them. And the thin ears devoured the 7 good ears. And I told this unto the magicians, but they were none that could declare declare it unto me. So he said, I told everybody else, all my advisors, but nobody could come up with any reason or any interpretation at all for my dream. And verse 25 now is where the lesson starts today. And it says, Joseph's reply to Pharaoh now. And Joseph said unto Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh is one. It's what it is. God hath showed Pharaoh what he is about to do. Pharaoh, God's giving you a warning or informing you of what's going to come about. It says the 7 good kine, or the 7 good cattle, are 7 years. And the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dream is one. Use different examples, but it's meaning the same thing. Verse 27, and the 7 thin and ill-favored kind that came up after them are 7 years. And the 7 empty ears, blasted with the east wind, shall be 7 years of famine. 28, this is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh. What God is about to do, he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, and there shall arise after them 7 years of famine, and all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known in the land by reason of that famine falling, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. So now Joseph has interpreted the dream, telling Pharaoh that the fatted calves and the good corn, or the plentiful corn, is going to be 7 years of good crops. And after that, it's going to be 7 years, the bad-looking cattle and the dried-up corn was an example of what was going to be the result of a famine that would be coming about. And that would last for 7 years also. And he said this famine is going to be so bad that what was grown in the 7 good years will be consumed and gone, and the famine will be so bad that they won't even comprehend the good time that they did have in that 7 years. So he's trailing it, and he says, Pharaoh, he gave you this 2 different dreams just to emphasize to you that this is what he plans to do, and this will come about. And he's wanting you to know. So Joseph is telling him, now this is not me, but this is God talking to you. He's giving you this for a reason. And then Joseph goes on. He's interpreted for Pharaoh now, instructing Pharaoh that this is God trying to tell you what to be ready for, what to do. And then he goes on in verse 33 now, from interpreting the dream, and then it's not Joseph talking, but it's still God talking through Joseph and telling Pharaoh what to do. Now this famine was going to be so bad that it was not only going to affect Egypt in such a bad way. It's talking about the cattle eating up the fatted calves, that the famine really got so bad that they said in Egypt at that time, the people reverted back to cannibalism. They were killing their own children to eat them because they didn't have anything to eat. So God was trying to warn him and give him instructions on how to prepare for this. So Joseph has interpreted it, and now God begins to tell Joseph what to tell Pharaoh to do to get ready for this famine that's coming about. So in verse 33, he says, Joseph speaking again, he says, now therefore let Pharaoh look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. let Pharaoh do this and let him appoint officers over the land and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. Now, I'm not sure, and I couldn't find anything that would enlighten me on what that fifth part of the land meant. I don't know if it meant when they were having the 7 good years, if they were to take a fifth of all the crops that were raised or what, and store that. But it wasn't uncommon at that time for towns, especially towns that had walls around them, or cities, to have storehouses in them, so they would be prepared if they were at war, that they would go behind the walls, close the gates, and they would still have a food storage in there to live off of while they were waiting out the people to leave that were attacking them. So it wasn't uncommon to store food. And that's pretty much what he's saying. It says, let Pharaoh do this, verse 34 again, and let him appoint officers over the land and take up the fifth part of the land of Egypt in the 7 plenteous years. Verse 35. It says, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities, like they normally would for preparing for a war or a siege, that they could still exist inside the towns, but not just in those, but through the whole land of Egypt. Every part of it would have to be storing food. In verse 36, it says, and that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land perish not through the famine. But he's telling him here, even if you prepare, if you do what God is telling you through me to do, he said, even during that 7 years of bad famine, he said, the people are still just going to barely exist. If the stuff is rationed out to them, if you have appointed officers over the whole land, different ones to be in authority, to ration out the food to them, so that they don't waste it. But even during that period of time and rationing the food, that it is still going to be a bad famine. So Pharaoh, God is telling you what to do, what is going to come about. For sure, he has planned it, but he's trying to warn you now, to prepare you so you can prepare your people so that they won't be wiped out. But evidently, it was still a pretty bad famine. Follow up on the story. Pharaoh then places Joseph as the one in authority, because he figures if Joseph is smart enough to interpret my dream, and smart enough to tell me what God is telling him for me to prepare to do, then I have enough faith in him. And now probably Pharaoh's thinking to himself, I have enough faith in this God, not my God, but the God of Joseph, who's telling me what to do to prepare to save my country, to save my people. So he appoints Joseph as the administrator, the top one. Joseph was given the job of being only second in command to Pharaoh himself. And over that period of time, they lived through it. Well, what happens, like we said before, that seemed like everything bad that happened to Joseph turned out for the good. So now Joseph has risen from being a slave in Egypt, being imprisoned in Egypt, and now finds himself as second in command only to Pharaoh. And I'm sure most of you probably know the story. The famine affected all the countries around Egypt. And what would happen a lot of the times when the other countries were affected, the people in those countries would come into Egypt because of the Nile River there, and they could still have food sources. But at this particular famine, it was really bad. Joseph's family, his father and Joseph's mother was Rachel. Rachel bore Joseph. When Joseph was gone, Rachel had another son, and Rachel died in childbirth. And that son's name was Benjamin. So there was 11 sons still at home. And during the famine affected them so bad too, that Jacob sent his sons into Egypt to get food, to bring food back to them. And in doing so, those 10 sons, that time Benjamin wasn't one of them, but the 10 sons that had sold him into slavery now had to approach him and ask him for food, but they didn't know who he was. And he recognized them when they come in to barter. So it ended up really that Joseph ended up not only saving Egypt, the people there, and a lot of the countries around, but he ended up saving his family. Again, prepping the downline for the final step or the final thing in God's plan of salvation for us today. And that was through and by Jesus Christ. So all this goes on for the downline of Jesus. And that's what he said, it's finished. He finished up the plan of salvation for us. Any comments or any questions? I had a hard time with this. I hope you've gotten something from it, and I hope I didn't mix anybody up on the downlines, because it's hard for me to try and remember who is who from this. But God, I guess the crux of the whole thing is God has a plan, and God has a plan for each and every one of us. And sometimes we may not think that. I'm sure Joseph, from time to time, when he would find himself in bad situations, would question, why is this happening to me? Why is it happening at this particular time? What have I done, maybe, to cause this to happen? And then, as time progressed and Joseph began to see how each and every bad thing that happened to him, God took it and used it as a blessing. So he went from being hated by his brothers because of the dream that he had when he was a child, and telling him that he could see that they were going to be bowing down to him, to what actually come about in the very end, that those 10 brothers did come back and bow down to him and honor him, give him homage too. So God, sometimes we can't see God working in our life until we get close to the end. Because I can look back through my life and see where God had intervened from time to time, and certain things happened in my life that directed me a certain way to bring about other things in my life. And he had a plan in my life. I couldn't see it at the time, but I can look back and see step by step where God intervened in my life too. And that's what Joseph was doing here. He saw the fulfillment of what God wanted to do in his life.
How many Bibles?
So a lot of times bad things that happen in our lives, most of the time, most all the time, God kind of lets us have our way. We have free will. And I think you probably have to agree, most of the time the bad things that happen to us, we bring upon ourselves a lot. And even doing that, God can still take that and help us work our way out of that problem, and if we'll let him make a blessing to us out of it. So comments at all? No? Well, I am through. You can visit with your neighbors there for a little bit.